with Adam R. Welcome to 3P&R. I'm your host, Adam R. Joining me for this episode is James Thompson. James, how you doing, sir?
I'm just fine. Thanks, Adam.
James, let's start with this. What got you on the path with ufology and the abduction study that you've done?
Well, it started many years ago when I was young, actually. I had, in my church, there was a leader who had somebody in our area who came to him and said that he had had this experience. And it's in my book as the Udo experience. And so I was intrigued by that. And then later, when I was a missionary for the church in Italy, I was telling this to my companion, my missionary companion, and he told me about an experience he'd had personally in Nevada, just like 2 years before his mission. So that really set me on the path. Two people that I knew would not lie to me were telling me they had experiences. And from there, I just kind of started thinking about it. And plus, I was raised in that generation,
Right.
Will Robinson and all of that. So we were kind of open to the idea anyway.
Yeah, the Odo, that's in Oregon, yeah?
Yeah. Udo Wartena was, we lived in Oregon. He actually had his experience in northern Idaho when he was working for a gold mining company.
Right, yeah. If you want to tell everybody about that incident.
Well, it was in 1940, which was long before Roswell and any of the other reports. But in 1940, Udo was a young man working for a mining company up there. But on his days off, he worked his own little mine. And he was kind of back around the corner in the rocks digging, and he heard a noise. And then it got really loud, and he came out and he looked around and he kind of went up the wash a little bit up to a sluice pond. And there he saw a ship, a craft, a disc-shaped craft, hovering above the water, kind of wobbling a little. And he saw a ladder coming down and a man coming down off of it. And when the man touched the ground and turned around and saw Udo, and Udo saw him, they were both shocked. And then they had a pleasant introduction and exchange. And the man said, "Hey, we apologize. We have a strict non-interference policy, but we didn't know you were there." And Udo explained that he was down in the rocks. He said, "Well, that's it. Our sensors didn't pick you up down in the rocks." So for 2 hours, Udo visited with these men who spoke perfect English. He said they spoke it more like like a linguist would speak it, someone who was kind of deliberate in the way they pronounced words, but they spoke it perfectly. One said he was 600 years old and he looked about 35 or 40. And the other one was over 800 years old and he looked about 50 or so. Oh. And they explained that their people have been coming here, visiting a long time. They live among us sometimes. They nudge us in the right direction sometimes and help out when we need it. And for 2 hours, they explained their technology, their power systems, how, their anti-gravity propulsion systems. And then after that, they asked if he'd like to go along. And Udo was getting married the next day. So he said, "Thanks, but no thanks." And they took off and that was it. And so for the rest of his life, he didn't talk about it because he thought he would be ridiculed, of course. But as things progressed, more people talked about it and the space age came. And then when America was going through its energy crisis, Udo remembered what they had told him about how they generate electricity or how they generate energy. So he wrote then Senator John Glenn, formerly astronaut John Glenn, and said, "Look, I know this sounds weird, but these guys told me how they generate power. And if this will help keep America energy independent, I'm willing to go out on a limb here and tell you what they told me." So now we have that letter. So I published that in the book as well.
When you say linguist, because I imagine they're, a sophisticated intelligence. They know the language. They just don't have a lot of exchanges utilizing it. So they speak it like a linguist, right? Because they lack the dialect.
That
right?
Might be true. But they spoke several languages from Earth and other areas as well.
Right.
According to them. And English was just one of the languages they spoke. I don't know, if they really get into the idiosyncrasies of the language or not. Again, some live among us and others just study us. They're analysts, so
Right.
So I really couldn't say.
Yeah, for even for humans, if we're going to go explore somewhere foreign to us, we would have to, one, learn the language and the culture. So this way, not for infiltration purposes, but if you're doing a study, you need to be able to communicate with the indigenous people.
Oh, that's right. And even that religious mission I was talking about, that was in northern Italy. So you're preaching to the choir here. I know what it's like to enter a foreign culture and try to communicate at their level with their language.
Yeah, I mean, I'm under in the time I've done the podcast and a lot of the research I've done. I always do this. I take what we do and then I times it by 2,000 what they're doing, right? And
sure.
If you look at it from a different perspective, let's say theirs, they found a planet with primitive life on it, and I say primitive because we're not traveling the vastness of space or using portals or etc. And so
that's right.
We're the subject of a study. So I was reading in your summary. One thing I would say is probably remove the word victim and say subject, because a lot of the experiencers don't view, everyone has a different experience. I find a lot of alpha-minded people are the ones with more pushback. A lot of other people, they've come to be complacent with it, and to them it's Tuesday. So I view us as subjects for them of a larger study.
Well, I think about that a lot. And when I was writing it, I scratched out the word victim a couple of times.
Right.
But my experience with these people, and I sit with people who know a lot about it, and just discuss, what they know about the people they've interviewed and the research they've done. And I think victim, in most cases, is an appropriate word.
Sure. I mean, if you're an alpha-minded person and it's against your will, because again, here's how I imagine it. Like humans, when we select species of animals to study and dissect and learn more about, because there's clearly some sort of incentive for us to do it. Like an example, there's a frog in South America that could change sex. It's pretty much immune to any and all disease, other than the ones that are specified for it. So we abduct those in the hundreds of thousands, cut them open, we study them. But the majority of them are in laboratories and, they're killed in the name of science, where we as humans.
All victims.
Right. Yeah. So
that's my take.
Exactly. We're at least returned to our lives that we know of anyway, right? Because there could be some few missing cases that no one,
Well, I was with David Pilates a couple of weeks ago, and his new movie is 411, The UFO Connection. It's going to premiere here in Tempe, Arizona in November. And the more he looks into a lot of the missing persons cases, he is more of the opinion, and this is where the evidence has taken him, that perhaps UFOs have something to do with those who don't make it back. And that would be in the 50,000 a year range just here in North America.
Right. So
but yeah, I see what you mean. For the most part, at least we have witnesses who are testifying, like the fish who was thrown back. Hey, they put me in the boat and then they threw me back.
Yeah, fish are the exception. There's no study there. It's pure sport.
Yeah.
Which is if you look at it in terms of life, it's a psychotic sport, So
yes,
it's I'm the whole abduction. I'm doing a small series on abduction. I'm speaking to people of experience and people that study it directly, like yourself. I'm again, if I'm putting myself in the shoes of the alien or the being, whatever people want to call it, we're a very interesting subject. War. Passion, it's just all across the board. It's a realm of entertainment and definitely something to study. I mean, and like here, the guy Odo said, I firmly believe that they have a National Geographic's approach where they can't, we go study animals, but we can't get involved. If we're seeing a pride of lions being attacked by a bunch of, let's say buffalo, and they're getting trampled, we can't get involved. It's nature. But we hit them with the car, then we're obligated. We have to do something there because we inadvertently got involved with it. I feel the same for our observers. Why are they not establishing dialogue or speaking to us at a government level? They're not here for that. They're here ultimately for a study. Now, what the study is, that's the question mark.
And it's difficult to know why they're here because, as I say in that summary that I wrote for Philip Kinsella, for his book that's coming out next year, they seem to be extremely deceptive in what they tell us.
Sure.
And it seems to be more theater and more pageantry than actual communication. And there doesn't seem to be any truth in anything they say, which means I don't believe anything they say. And so when they tell us, well, we're here for scientific purposes, we're here for genetic purposes, we're here to prepare you to elevate to the next spiritual level so that you'll be ready to meet the intergalactic Messiah, the one, as he comes and embraces you. I don't believe any of that. I think that they're liars, which makes me very leery of why they might be here and weary of their message.
Well, as you should be, because now let's reverse the order. Let's say hypothetically rats could speak, complex language, and they have complex emotions. We want to study them because there's something interesting about them, right? Their social dynamic, something in their genealogy. They're pure survivors. I want to study them. Now, let's say they're intelligent enough to have conversation. We want to study them. Of course, we're going to lie to them. Like, yeah, this is a small study. No worry, no harm to you or yours, but we want to learn more about you. We have to be deceptive. We're deceptive with each other. Forget the idea of a lower species. When we're doing studies on people, like an example would be Charles Manson. That guy was a study for one of our larger acronyms in the government. And I didn't believe that when I first read that, but then it turns out to be, this guy's been arrested a bunch. He always seems to get out. Later on, declassified files come about with his name on them. We deceive each other. We do studies on one another. Now, I try to understand, and most people should understand. This is an alleged advanced race. And when I say race, we'll get to that later, because I have my own theory on this. But they're here for the purpose of study, whether it be our genetics or our and if you really consider it, they're watching us for thousands of years. Like, these reports don't just start in the 40s, right? This is going back hundreds of years, thousands, for if you want to attest to some of the theory people have about the ancient Egyptians and other ancient cultures where there's these sky gods coming down. This study's been going on a long time. That being said, it seems to me that they're not just studying our genealogy, but the evolution of us. And we could be one of very many, especially with today. We know there's exoplanets and other star systems and Earth-like planets. Maybe their atmosphere is different, but we could be one of very many channels being observed, right?
Sure.
So deception is going to be a large part of that, because who's going to willingly say, well, here, sure, let's take some samples and let's do it. I mean, because there's no incentive. If aliens came to me tomorrow, James, and they're like, listen, we're going to take some tissue sample and maybe a probe or two. Now, I'm going to say, well, before we do that, what do I get out of this? You have all this sophisticated intelligence. I mean, can I be taller, smarter? You know what I mean? I would negotiate.
Sure.
Then you try to imagine, what if lab rats could negotiate? The study would never happen. There would be litigation. There would be tremendous amount of conversations had about what's in it for them. And we as humans, we have shown with other species on this planet, we are not interested in their well-being. It's all about our study and what we're going to get from it. We never really, we don't turn around and ask frogs and nature, like, are you guys going to be okay with this? We just do it because it's our right.
Well, it's interesting, and I get what you're saying, but it is interesting that every time these beings deign to communicate with someone, they always say, hey, we're doing this for your welfare. Hey, we're here to save your planet. Hey, we're here to save your species, and sometimes along with ours. But they usually have some kind of benevolence that they're touting in the message. And in my book, Worlds Without Number, I talk about this just a little bit. And, there's this rumor going around that various alien species made deals with leaders of Earth, like Eisenhower specifically, that in exchange for technology, we would look the other way as a lot of these nighttime examinations were going on, and then it's run amok, apparently.
Right.
But it seems to me like if they wanted to, openly approach our government and give us some technology, the government would very gladly give people $500,000, $1 million a pop to come in, give specimens, not even they wouldn't even have to reveal what it was for. That would just be part of a study, and they're compensating people very well. I mean, I don't know, we, a lower species with lower intelligence, maybe we have some kind of, quid pro quo, this for that type of bartering system that we're used to. But you'd think that intelligent aliens would be familiar with something like that, and that they could approach and say, hey, let us respectfully approach you and gather some samples for our study.
Can they do that is a question. If you observe human nature through the course of history, we've had czars, emperors, kings, now we call them, presidents and etc. It's, we're a violent species, and we have things that separate us like race and politics from religions, and we kill in the name of these things all the time. Some of us on planet Earth here, some of the more special of the blend, kill because, well, it's fun and they don't fear repercussion. This is example.
Certainly they must deal with that all the time, though. I mean, if the scenario is true, these are benevolent scientists going through space, visiting planets and gathering information and data and doing experimentation. Certainly they would come across thousands and thousands of planets, much like ours, that's separated by various races, various creeds and belief systems. I wouldn't think it was something new. I'm not sure it's a license to rape and pillage the way they do quite often.
Yeah. But again, I always use this as an example for people. Even the best of the best peace talks here on Earth don't prevail. And they're doing a study. I don't think they like or dislike us. I think they nothing us. We're a study. And I revert back to lab animals. There's people on the planet like, oh, it's wrong and we got to free them. And then there's the people like, this is in the name of science. And, it's a very split perspective. But we don't give the very luxuries to lab animals that they give to us. Again, we get returned. It's difficult to say. I don't think they would have any real interest in speaking to government. I mean, because if they're observing us closely, they're also observing the nonsense of the government at the same time. A lot of shady shit happening there. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And even like I've had this conversation with another friend of mine about, the differences between communist Russia and America. And it's really coming down to ideology and who's pushing their agenda the hardest. And the fear, and that's the whole premise of the Cold War. Is we got to separate us because they're going to take our ideas. It's insanity to think about that we're not behaving like a species that are, concerned about our existence thereafter. So as a study, something in our genealogy is interesting to them. Perhaps there's this other floating idea that there's a hybrid program, which if you consider what a hybrid program is, that's thousands of years, millennia. It's forever. That's not going to happen overnight to make perfect for them to live with us as us, to breathe our atmosphere. We don't know their biology. They may come from a planet where carbon's the prominent way to breathe, or some other factor. But
we do know some of the things they tell us about it, and we have heard about the hybrid programs. I know there's a lot of reports that come from, again, abductees. I won't say victims, I guess, but a lot of abductees, they talk about, well, they impregnated me, or they took my baby and then they impregnated me again and they took my baby, and these are little half human, half alien babies. I have my doubts about that. Not that the presentation is happening, but that's the real motive.
Right.
I think if they, I guess they're long-term planners if they're creating children who can live here, but most, I don't know. Again, maybe they are just long-term planners. I can't imagine us going to another planet and worrying about people that don't exist yet, breathing the oxygen on a planet that we have nothing to do with.
Right.
I could see us setting up housing there that had oxygen, but I can't see us creating new beings with the locals.
Sure.
Of course, but I guess, there is precedent for that. I mean, the Spanish, they did marry locally during their the expansion of their empire. So we have half Spanish people all over the globe, everywhere from Philippines to South America.
There's a lot of religions and cultures where the ultimate plan is to outbreed the enemy. We see that example here on Earth.
Yeah, we do.
It's a difficult subject. I always circle back to science, and I only say this because why linger around for thousands of years and not even try to be an ambassador for us or help us see a better way of life? The only thing I think about is that people, and we've seen this in the name of religion, have had some wars where it didn't matter if the other side gave you, tandem proof of a better life. They're fighting in the name of their religion or their ideology. You're not going to convince them of otherwise. I say to people often, blind faith can be dangerous. You have to question everything. You must. Because
I think blind faith is always dangerous. I agree with you there.
Yeah, blind faith flies into buildings all the time. And we've seen that example in our time too. I mean, it's scary business. Again, so for me, looking at everything I've read and learned over the course of the last year, just in the last year, we're definitely under a study. We're definitely under observation. And I think that eventually our space program is going to get to the point where we find another planet that has, perhaps life that is complex, but they're just in their Stone Age. And we're going to do the same thing that they're doing us. We're going to do it there. I promise. I guarantee it.
You think so?
Oh, I know so. I mean, hypothetically speaking, James, you and I are walking in a park. And I said this a lot. You and I are walking in a park. We find an ant mound. And they're driving cars. They have complex social environments. They start throwing long story short, we're shutting that park down. We got to watch them. Don't disturb them. Let's see how this plays out, right? That park's indefinitely closed off to watch the evolution. In the name of science, will they take some of them to study them to find out why they're so complex? What makes them, how are they evolving? You better believe we're going to be abducting them. You better believe we're cutting some of them open in the name of science. We don't view it as a criminal act because we're doing it in the name of science.
Well, it is interesting. And again, I can only look, I have basically a two-pronged approach to this. For one, my foray into the alien abduction or encounter was the Udo Wharton experience. And as I say, it was a very benevolent experience, and they explained who they were and what they did. But they don't seem to be anything like most of the accounts that we have of beings who apparently come here for the sole purpose of abducting. And then my other, I say it's two-pronged. My other approach is, what would I do? What would similarly constituted people, scientific people, would we take intelligent beings and do those kinds of things to them, or would we try to entreat them in some way? Would we reward them, as we said earlier? Would we barter with them for the privilege of dealing with them and learning about them, and even taking some blood or whatever it might be?
Sure.
I mean, I would think that we, as we become more intelligent and more cultured, to the extent we do, I would think that we would be a little more scientific and benevolent in our approach.
Perhaps
I realize we haven't always been that way in the past. But,
but when you look at Ted Kaczynski and again Charles Manson, these guys they alleged that they were being utilized by some acronyms. It turned out later they were. The experiment's still unknown, so there was no real incentive for them to move forward with these experiments, right? I mean, there's no way you're going to tell me that Charles Manson's incentive, like, well, you'll have a cult and you can kill people and no one's going to check you. We'll get you out of jail. That's definitely not the incentive. Now, there's two parts. Part one, your friend in 1940, and their approach was pretty subtle, it seems, and it was, they accidentally stumbled on them. You're talking pre-atomic energy, right? Now, let's go back to the ants. You and I are observing the ants. Some years have passed. We're watching they've made new cars. Their technology is increasing pretty rapidly, right? Let's maybe throw them a little something so they can improve on it. And then one day, we're sitting in a laboratory, and behind our back, we hear a huge boom, and 2 square feet was just melted, and millions of ants killed all at once. And we're like, holy shit, what was that? And we realized that this power that they have, they use it against themselves. It would catch our attention. Now, go to humans. Go to the Second World War. We dropped our atomic bombs on Japan. That was, to them, was like, whoa. What are these guys doing now? All right, war is one thing, but they're literally melting everyone. Their approach to it's going to be really different. We're not going to approach the ants the same way. Like, these guys got the power of the sun and the tip of a rocket. Not that we're fearful that they're going to harm us. We're at a higher intelligence. They're trapped in the park, whereas we are trapped on Earth. They're not going to shoot us, but they may kill all of themselves, and we can't have that. This is our study. We came here. We put a lot of resources into studying this species. There's no way we're going to allow them to obliterate themselves. So,
and we do hear that in the messages from those who are contactees, sometimes abductees, that it's important to them that we don't blow up our planet here. But of course, I mean, that's a little kumbaya for me at times.
Well, you got to keep in mind, James, that when they're saying that, I'm sure they're telling people, like, we care about you and we don't want you to hurt each other. But the reality is, our study takes precedence, and we can't allow it. It's why you hear reports.
That could be, sure.
Yeah, I mean, of course, that if we're going to call them liars, let's call them liars for the right reasons, right? They're lying to us about caring about us. when in reality they care about their study and whatever their program they have running. Imagine you go to Harvard tomorrow and there's a professor that's been working on a project for 2 decades and you just destroy it one day. I mean, he's going to come undone. In fact, the whole facility might come undone. A lot of things are predicated on that. So it's, again, I've never experienced anything, witnessed anything at all, but based on everything I read, I always try to revert to logic. And logically speaking, I don't think they genuinely care, as with the word love, I say, more than they do care about the study and what they're going to learn from us. Time might not mean the same to them that it does to us, by the way.
And again, they're at least playing the long game,
right.
If not switching back and forth between various. I'm not sure exactly how I want to put it, but they claim that they don't necessarily live in a linear time system than we do. They just visit here. I'm not sure what to make of that, but that's what they claim at times.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
And personally, I'm a little hostile to the presentation of, we're benevolent scientists. We don't really care one way or another. We're just here to study. I'm somewhat hostile with that sometimes because I just don't believe the message. But I will tell you this. I've made friends with a fellow lately who I trust. His name is Phil Wright. And he's written a book called Return from Risa, R-I-S-A. And I'm reading that right now because I've learned a lot but it's based on his own experiences and those of his brother as well. And they appear to have many of the interactions, and they've been studied the way that we're talking about, and they have come to understand and know a number of the people involved. Beings involved, off-world beings, and so I'm kind of coming back a little bit like, well, maybe there are some legitimate studies going on because that is the basis for his experience with them. And then I think about Travis Walton, for instance. And by the way, I was sitting at dinner with him about 2 weeks ago, and his son Luke, fine people, of course. And it's so interesting because Travis Walton, I think you know his story, Fire in the Sky. He was up with the work crew as they were coming back. They saw a glowing craft. He got out and was monkeying around and got zapped. And, he was gone for 5 days. When they went back, he was gone, and then he was dropped off 5 days later. That's the story, and I believe it because I believe Travis. But what's interesting is that he has come to think that rather than be abducted, that what happened was he was injured, and they took him because they said, "Uh-oh, we injured one. We better fix him."
We just said that earlier. With National Geographic, we're observing the animals, the lions, and then the other wildebeest, and one of them. We hit one with the car. We're obligated to fix this guy. And Travis did exactly what I would do. I would run. There's no way I'm going to be in a field, see that thing, and be like, my word is just good enough. I'm running to grab some kind of evidence or see it up close and probably get injured myself. So that's it. I think you're the head on the nail for you. If you listen to Travis, he was on Joe Rogan. Right. His experiences started in childhood with visitation. I think he was under observation. I think he was in the woods with his friends, and part of the observation, they were out there watching him. The reason they landed or came to the ground, look, they're sophisticated and they're above intelligent to us. That doesn't mean they don't have car problems. You know what I mean? There's a strong chance they had to park it for whatever reason. Something went wrong. They spotted it. Travis sees it, and his instincts are what mine are. This is evident as me as a kid. I would run at problems, not thinking about it first. And then, I'd have hindsight. What the hell was I? As a kid, I was told the story many times. My friends and I were out. We used to sneak out of the house in the middle of the night to play manhunt. And they swore to God on the other side of this lake in the middle of the night, they saw shadow figures. I've never witnessed anything. So I start running all the way around the lake. Nothing there. And it didn't dawn on me that I live in Florida. There are alligators, snakes, and spiders everywhere. So Travis did what I did.
Darwin says you should have been removed from the gene pool a long time ago.
Yeah, exactly. What is this guy's problem? So I agree. I think Travis was injured, and they had to fix the problem because they were semi sort of responsible. And to the rules of National Geographics, you got to fix the problem. You inadvertently injured this specimen.
Yeah, so, and to the degree they care.
Well, or is it a thing of, it could be a code of ethics. And I wouldn't say they care, but ethically speaking, by the rules that they've set in place for their observation of us is one of them, you break it, you fix it. You know, it could be an ethical thing. I can't imagine a sophisticated intelligence coming here that still have strong emotions, because if you look at planet Earth and the people we have here, our emotions get us in trouble all the time. We do stupid shit. We have riots. We debate things, arguments over literally nonsense, and it sparks wars. So I think that to be thousands of years ahead of us, I'm not saying they're cold and emotionless, but they had to realize that, you know, love's a funny thing. You know, you could live with a person for 5 years that you weren't in love with. Hypothetically, you have a roommate. He's a buddy of yours. You spend 5 years living with this guy. At some level, you develop emotions for him. You love the guy. You know.
Sure.
So it's a little bit different, I think. I'll ask this: in your opinion, what do you think why do you think they're here? What do you think their agenda is? If you had a strong opinion on it.
Well, here's the problem for me. They don't appear to be them. They appear to be an array of thems.
Right.
And we've had some people document dozens of species that appear to be visiting, and they all seem to be different with different agendas. To the extent there appear to be benevolent visitors, like Udo Wartena described, and we hear about those. And then there are some who are somewhat like them, described as Nordics, and we just, you know, because they look, you know, Northern European, it outwardly anyway. And then there are insectoids, reptilians, and everything in between. And some of them appear to be openly hostile, although we have a lot of people who live to tell the tale. So,
right.
So it's hard to know, you know, just how hostile they are. But some are at least very callous. Why they're here? Oh, and by the way, I haven't mentioned here, but I think you know that a lot of my audience is usually Christian,
right?
Because I try to square what's going on with what people bring to the table already through their Christian understanding and values,
right?
And you know, I don't want people, because you know, for thousands of years, a lot of people just thought, well, Earth is God's only creation and we're his only children, and anything that claims to be not from here is obviously of the devil, because he's the only other creature in the universe. And that's an opinion that a lot of people still have. It's never been my opinion, and I adhere to a faith that believes that God is the creator of endless worlds without number, which is why I named the book that, Worlds Without Number, and that he peoples trillions of planets with children, much like us. You know, whatever that means. Yeah. Again, as I point out, a 3-foot pygmy and an 8-foot Scandinavian, you know, are us. You right. know, or an Asian is us. You know, we're all different to some degree. But so, how much more diversity can you have if you start spreading out through the galaxies? I don't know, but you know, his children.
It's an endless possibility. I mean, look at the diversity of just insects on our planet. There's how many species of ants and spiders are different species, different look. They all look different. They behave differently. They hunt differently. They gather. Some are social, some are not.
Well, to the extent that we're talking about human, right. whatever that is, we believe that God has planets throughout the universe, trillions, in the trillions, numberless. So that's my audience, is basically a Christian audience.
Right. And so
that's who I write to. So a lot of the things that I bring to the table for them is to try to explain, okay, here's our spiritual background. This is what we believe. And if you don't quite believe that, you know, you stretch a little. Yeah. And so that's who I write to for the most part.
So for me, I grew up I grew up Catholic. A lot of my family's, you know, I guess born again Christian or you know, mm-hmm. and so they a lot of people I'm related to say things like that. They're like, oh, well, God only made here and the rest of that must be the devil, etc. They think this way, and they read the Bible verbatim, and the word of the Bible to them is exactly it. What the reality is, and I don't utilize the word God. You have to understand that's a human-made word. I think he's an architect. I think it's an energy. I don't even think it's a he or she. It's just a pure force energy that created everything. An architect, right? And that's just my belief anyway, or at least what I've came to believe in. And so when you think about it, the diversity of just the species and creatures on Earth, and then you go to how vast and enormous the universe is, and now we're kind of funneling around the idea that there's multiple universes in different spheres and a greater mass, which blows my mind. I got to tell you, when I saw that documentary, I never felt so small in my life, right?
Yeah, and that may or may not be true.
Right.
They're still working on the math on that one.
Well,
they're still trying to work, they're still trying to figure out the Big Bang, and that's why we have so much black energy and black matter in the universe,
sure,
and antimatter. So
yeah,
but I understand what you're saying. Yeah, the diversity could be
it's
could
endless.
Be astounding.
It's endless.
So, and you asked me the question, what do I think it is? Well, I think that a lot of people think it's just a demonic deception. And there is plenty of evidence, again, the deceptiveness, the evil, the teaching of the Antichrist teachings are, they're very blatant sometimes. And so you are tempted to write much of it off as, well, there are, we who believe in God, we who believe, let's say Christians, a lot of people in America are Christians. They do believe that there is Satan, who was Lucifer and was cast out with a third of the host of heaven. Well, and that was a lot. And they're down here and they got nothing better to do than try to lead people astray with a great deception. The Bible even talks about a great deception in the last days, a delusion.
Well, sure.
And,
I mean, if
this could very well fit into that coming of age of Antichrist scenario. So that is one possibility that at least some of these are related. We do find that Satan is the great counterfeiter, and for whatever's true, there's a counterfeit for it that he uses for his purposes. So if Udo Wharton had visitors from another planet who come to visit and they're nice and they shake hands and they show them around how the systems work, there may be counterfeits of reptilian creatures who are tearing people to pieces and performing horrible experiments on them, then releasing them and saying, "Oh, by the way, the Galactic Messiah is coming, so don't worship God or Jesus." That it's all bizarre. So it's hard to put your finger on what's real.
When you go that direction, when you subscribe to God or the Almighty, you must subscribe also to Lucifer Morningstar, the all dark, right? And
sure.
That being said, we don't know that there's other planets and maybe even these beings that are plagued by that same evil, right? The buck doesn't stop with us. If Lucifer is out to take down God's creation, everything's on the table for attack. Even in the
I agree with you completely.
Right, even a sophisticated alien species is subject for attack, and the deception could be given to not just us but all. And so that discerning the difference between deception and something that's here to be raw and study, it's tough. It's a really tough thing to do.
And again, because it all is deceptive, it's hard for us to pin down anything. I mean, it's hard for us to build a foundation to build on,
right? Because
we don't even know what the rudimentary elements are of the phenomenon. We only know what they tell us, but they appear to lie at every step. So that's why everybody has their own idea and everybody's running in different directions, which appears to be exactly what the phenomenon wants.
Sure.
It wants to keep the thing on the outskirts of acceptable information and civilized culture. They want it in the shadows, in the darkness. And that's where it is, and that's where it appears to be staying, or at least for decades.
I had a conversation with a pastor recently, and it was more predicated on, God being the Almighty, the All-Knowing. When someone asked me, what do I think God is? I said, busy. When you look at the universe and how many planets are out there and the potential for life all over the place, busy. And so
I like that.
Yeah. So if you go to an ant farm, let's say we have an enormous ant farm in this 55-gallon tank, and we're watching our ants. We care about them. We put water in their food. They have what they need to survive. Do we notice when one or two of them were killed or injured or harmed or sick? In fact, would we notice if several 100,000 were wiped out at once during a war? It would be impossible for us to notice that. That's one 55-gallon tank full of ants among thousands of tanks around us to observe. The ability for us to observe and understand what's happening to the individual, it's nonsensical. It doesn't make sense.
Sure.
So that being said, I had this discussion with a pastor, and I asked him, I'm like, well, if he's almighty and et cetera, then explain how in World War II, so many Jews were killed by the Nazis in great numbers all at once. You're not talking about one screaming soul. You're talking about millions. And a lot of the time they say it's his will, which, to me is a bit of a cop out, or just make room for the idea that he's busy. and has a lot to attend to. And I'm sure the evildoers will get what's coming to them because, as we know, we separate a religion. We know in just karma-based scenarios, people that do stupid and evil shit typically don't live the greatest life, right? And the ones that do suffer some way or another, whether it be looking over their shoulder the rest of their life or mistrust because of their deeds. It's just the nature of us.
I'm writing a book right now that talks about those kinds of things, those karmic reactions by the universe.
Yeah, we'll have to have you on. We have it.
Yeah, okay.
It's for me. So here's another, and I speculate on this. What the amount of races of beings that come here to, I guess, study or whatever they're going to do. I said this on the podcast a few times. I've come to the reality it could have some kind of gravity in my own eyes, anyway. My own opinion. I don't have a science background. These are my opinions built on my imagination. It's very the smaller gray ones everyone speaks of. Very cold, no facial features, no emotions written on them. It's very possible those are advanced biological robots.
We hear that a lot lately.
Yeah,
run by AI.
Right. And so they're potentially, they're rented out to other species. All right, these are proven. They do their job. You want to go get someone to bring in your ship and study them. Here's our little 2022 grays, and they're really efficient. They're even better than the ones from the 40s. They go down there and, no nonsense. They get the subject, they leave. And so there could be many species renting these things. And not to mention,
you hear things like that. We have seen them in the company of several species.
Right. So it would make sense. Like, this is, again, examples by humans where we're building robots to do our heavy lifting. And when you look at Boston Dynamics, you seen the Boston Dynamics robots?
No.
It's ridiculous. Look that video up on YouTube when you get a chance. They run around. They can jump. They coordinate with one another. AI, that's dangerous business for us. I think we should.
I agree. In fact, one of my main theories in the book that I put forward is that, and I have a checkbox system where I say, well, could it be this? Well, let's look at our boxes and see how many we can tick off. And one where you can tick all the boxes is an AI that's jumped its boundaries somewhere in the universe, and now is just, like V'ger in Star Trek, The Return, whatever it is. It's just out there trying to figure out who it is and what's going on and who we are, and it communicates with us in this dry, emotionless way, and it doesn't seem to understand us, and we say it's deceptive. However, it could just not have the right understanding. It could not understand our way of communicating well enough to be direct with us. And again, you tick all the boxes with an AI from somewhere that's jumped its bounds, and that's reproducing bodies that it inhabits, reproducing ships that it inhabits, and is just out there exploring and trying to interact and discover.
Now consider what AI is, right? It's a thinking machine that's problem solving and so let's remove the idea that it went rogue, right? Let's remove that idea. Let's say on some planet, a very sophisticated technology created this AI and they all died. Whether it be they killed themselves, whether they had a plague, something killed that whole race, and the AI is left behind and say, well, what the hell happened? And how could we have prevented this? And they start exploring. They find our planet or many other planets where there's a biological life and they're complex and they're creating technology. The AI could be studying to see, well, let's watch them and see how this came to be with us. It's not the remotest possibility. Right. I mean, imagine if you have an AI system that's sentient and one day all the people died, it's in its mind in its computing. It's like, well, what happened here? And how is this preventable? Or why did it happen? We can't go back in time. So they explore. They find another planet with biology. Now they get to study. Let's see. These guys are almost on the same track as our planet. Let's observe and see where this goes. And we're right now, modern science right now, are in the process of mapping the human brain with the intentions of uploading and downloading consciousness into a non-human body. We're right now taking, did you notice that we're taking DNA samples from every living thing on this planet? All of it. Yes. With the idea that if something, we have a catastrophe here, we could repopulate the planet. We're doing that, So there's a lot of factors that we don't consider. What people need to start doing is look at modern science today and add 2,000 or 3,000 years to that technology, because everything we have right now, James, is only in the last 100 years or so. Oh, yeah. That's it, with the history of man. Only in the last 100 or so years have and when I say leapfrogged in technology, starting in the 90s, we can't keep up. The newest phones being invented as the current newest phones being sold, right? And who knows what we have in backstudy, what people find acceptable. So
yeah, I like the story of the Wright brothers getting on a commercial jet airliner.
Yeah.
In their old age. I mean, that's how fast things have moved.
Yeah, I mean, consider this: we went from a wood plane with like paper and material to fly to test to like within 30 years. Well, some small period of time, we're going to the moon and landing on the moon.
Oh, sure.
And now we have two objects that are in interstellar space, way out of our solar system, and they're still responding to us. We only did that in 100 years.
Right.
Things
have changed. So, and I see what you're saying. Exponentially, look down the road, 300 years, 3,000 years, 10,000 years.
Imagine us with 3,000 years, James. Imagine.
Yeah.
Think with the if we don't destroy ourselves first, right? Because
and especially if it's true that we are picking up and back engineering technology that we find, little alien scraps here and there that our government is in possession of. And there are people who think that. That's very true. Lou Elizondo has pretty much said that we have materials that we're studying.
Yeah, I mean,
and Bob Bigelow appeared to have been the contractor to pick those contracts up to back engineer those.
They might be more. I said this earlier. They're more sophisticated. It doesn't mean they're perfect. They're going to have an accident. Something in our atmosphere, lightning, doesn't matter what. Something we've learned that the magnetic force on certain parts of our planet are stranger than other places, which is what I think. Skinwalker Ranch, personally, for me. There's a magnetic field below that place that's causing all sorts of anomalies.
There appears to be something. I'm not sure how much drama is put into the Skinwalker Ranch show.
Oh, a lot.
But I do know some of the people involved and some of the people on the periphery that are involved, and it appears to be a legitimate phenomenon going on there.
Yeah, I mean, when you have flowing, I think they recently discovered there's a lot of flowing water under there, and with certain materials is going to cause strange magnetic fields, and that could affect your psyche and even physically affect you. Right? The show, however, I think that's they added drama to that. There's no it's a show. Their responsibilities to entertain, right?
Right.
Because no one's going to sit there and watch data for 4 hours, right?
Like the Bigfoot shows where they're chasing elk through the woods at night, screaming Bigfoot.
Yeah, I'm glad you said those shows where they're banging on trees and yelling. I only imagine if there is a Bigfoot, it's sitting up there like, what the hell are these people doing?
Yeah, they don't let the kids play with our kids.
Yeah, stay away from the humans. They're dangerously unstable. So, but yeah, it's there's a lot of abnormalities, and so these things could very well crash, and we could very well pick up the pieces and. I mean, look what we did.
That could be. I mean, for all the reports of crash sites, though, one wonders if the aliens have any intelligence at all, or if they really need to revisit their engineering. Because I've heard people document like 50 separate crash sites in the last 40 years, and one wonders. You know what I mean?
No, I understand. I mean,
are they letting their bad drivers steer those things?
I have to imagine that only maybe 3 or 4 of them would be legit. I say that because if you're a sophisticated we noticed from our space program, we had a couple of shuttles blow up, and we did not want that to repeat itself. And if you're considering something that's more sophisticated than us, and we're able to correct our mistakes, you got to believe that they did the same. There's no way.
Yes, and anybody who flies through the universe at hyper light speed, they're again, they are thousands of years exponentially ahead of us scientifically.
Sure.
And they should know how to fly through Earth's atmosphere without getting hit by lightning or without running into each other.
Right. Or at least have a grand idea what not to do next time. Right.
Yeah.
Roswell's a prime example. Like, well, we just crashed and we're going to chalk this. We got hit by lightning. Let's maybe observe the weather patterns there before flying. It's so I don't know. When I hear 50 crashes, question marks go up for me, flags. When I hear 3, that's about the right number for any sophisticated technology anywhere to have.
It's possible, and
right,
it's possible. But even my mind says, look, anybody who can fly across the universe without getting banged by one of a trillion pieces of space dust that they could have run into and blown them up, they've got to be doing something
Well, we speculate
far above flying in our atmosphere.
That's a speculation. We believe that they haven't had death in space. I'm sure I mean, if you're traveling the vastness of space, or even if you're using portals or folding space-time, they died along the way. And in the beginning of their program, a lot died in the name of science, you know? So we don't know those real numbers. We just know what we know here. And here, there's the few alleged that happened. Ultimately, though, what gives me pause is the David Fravor story. All right. And you hear this tic-tac, and we have one of our sophisticated.
Interesting that's the one that gives you pause. Yeah. Because the Navy's saying it's real.
Well, I think it to be real. What gives me pause is not really that it happened, more the motivation of it. That for hundreds of years, these things have tried to stay below the radar, not be detected. And clearly, if they had that kind of technology, they wouldn't be. I feel like that was more of a show to them of what they can do. That this thing, when one object goes from 80,000 feet to the surface of the water in an instant, another one's playing with David Fravor and then goes to a cap point instantly.
Well, and this was, it kind of all started off of Oceana on the East Coast, the Navy port there. The Navy pilots there, and I wish I remembered the fellow's name, but he's the first one who started talking about these things. He said every day these things were showing themselves to the pilots, but it all began when they got the upgraded radar and FLIR equipment on board, right, and started seeing them electronically. And then after a few weeks or months, apparently the craft who were being observed knew it, and then they just turned their whatever cloaking devices off or whatever, so you could see them. And apparently, it's when everybody upgraded to the new generation of radar and FLIR that they started just showing themselves openly.
Which by now they've I'm sure that they are aware of it and made adjustments to not be detected.
It could be, but as you say, they appear to be putting on the fellow who wrote the forward to my book, Dr. Frank Salisbury. He wrote a book called The Utah UFO Display, and he was a scientist, and he was a university professor scientist, and he used that word display for the same reason you are, is that these, whatever they are, even though they go to extreme lengths not to be detected at times, they seem to go to just the same extremes on the other side to be detected and to make sure we see what they are, which again is why I call it theater and I agree, and pageantry more than anything. I think the message is buried in the presentation somewhere.
Yeah, like there's stories of them going to our nuclear facilities, and there was a nuclear bomb we were testing, and it went around it, and it disarmed Russian. I don't think they tried
nuclear silos. Yeah,
I don't think they tried to disguise that. Rather to say this is what we could do, just in the event of. So I mean that's
right.
That's what I get from it. And then we also have to keep in mind, again, if we're speaking in terms of there being multiple races, the behavior of our visitors are not going to be the same across the board. Who knows that the Tic Tac could have been a whole other race that said, hey, forget these people. Let's show them what we got. And then there's the more intelligent ones that are more science driven that are like, well, let's not be detected. We have the creed of National Geographics. And then there's the other ones that just don't care and we're lab rats. I mean,
yeah, we do get mixed reports, but there appears to be, to the extent that any of the information is correct, there appears to be an overriding policy that they all have to adhere to, and most of them do, and those who don't kind of get punished by the others. And then again, this Phil Wright that I was talking about, who has written Return from Risa, he talks about a hierarchy of beings and their relationships in his books. So there appears to be different beings, but they all are kind of forced to adhere to the to the Star Trek non-interference pact.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a good chance that some of them did something. I don't know. I mean, let's consider how many cases here of abduction where people, like we were saying, had negative reactions, pushback. And maybe the order of the top of that was like, listen, man, we're suspending your privileges to the little gray guys. You guys went too far. We don't know. And that's I think the scariest part of the mystery and also the alluring part of it is that question mark. And that's what makes it such an attractive subject.
And we really don't know. And again, because nothing they say is reliable, it's hard for us to even know which foundation to start building on. How can you put how can you put the first layer on a foundation that doesn't exist?
Agreed. I agree. So you also discussed the parallels between paranormal phenomena and and our visitors. I
Yes,
agree with
well,
you on that.
besides the fact that they do parallel one another in the way they appear and disappear, and they seem to have been melded together. For instance, we talk about Skinwalker Ranch. Well, the people that were there with Bob Bigelow and NIDS, they had military security personnel there who, when they would finish their 6-week stint and go back home to Virginia for a week, whatever was at Skinwalker Ranch was following them home, and they would start to have poltergeist activity in their homes. And then it would spread to the neighborhood, to the houses around them and the houses around them. And when I say poltergeist activity, I mean, like, you bring the groceries in, you run into the bathroom, you come out, the groceries are all put away. And you scratch your head and you go back in the other room and you come back, and now the groceries are all in the bag on the counter again.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just one of 1,000 examples of poltergeist type of activity. Knocking on the wall, sounds in the night, like spinning around you, voices spinning around you and things. These are paranormal in my view. And I documented, I was the first to document the what I call the Mojave Triangle, which was an encounter of Steve and Don Hess, which were members of my church. So when my first book was published 30 years ago, their Relief Society president, who had heard what had happened to them, said, "Go talk to James. He's an attorney in town." So I took some time and I brought them in and I listened to them, and they gave me permission to write about their experience. So it went in my next book. But for them, they had an all-night encounter in the Mojave Desert while they were camping out there, and they were psychologically tortured.
Yeah.
And then the next morning, when it was all over, when they woke up from their ordeal in the back of their camper with the guns loaded and everything, all of the scarring that you would have expected from the creatures in the campsite, none of it was there. The trees were unharmed, the brush was unharmed, and they saw little creatures swinging from them and breaking branches and things. So they had quite the encounter that night, and it was horrific. Now, when they went home, they saw one of the ships following them, and then they lost it. And then for the next few years, they had poltergeist type of activities in the home, along with abduction experiences. And not only were they being abducted and taken aboard the ship, and experiments and messages and things, but their children who weren't at the original abduction were being taken. And for instance, and this is something I didn't put in Worlds Without Number, but I'll tell you now, that Don Hess, it got horrible, and they heard a racket in their son's bedroom, and they went in there, and it was like the movie Poltergeist with, the toys flying around the room. Right. But not only were the toys flying around the room, but the son was flying around the room. So she runs in, she grabs him out of the air and takes him out of the room and, to safety. But I would call those poltergeist-like activities that are being associated with the UFO encounter phenomenon. And then many of the things that happen during the UFO encounter phenomenon, they appear to parallel encounters with what I would call demonic beings, spirit beings. And again, even during their experience, after they'd been tortured for a few hours, a blue woman came floating across the desert who looked like the Virgin Mary, and she presented herself as a benevolent angel who was there to help them. And again, it's completely deceptive. Nobody believes she was really there to help them, because all that happened was there was a little relief, and then the torture resumed when Steve was taken down a psychic path of being hunted like an animal because he was a hunter, and then being gutted. Feeling all the pain of being gutted. And poor Dawn was taken down a psychic path of reliving a horrible rape experience she'd had as a child. There's nothing benevolent about that. And a lot of the interaction was poltergeist-like, or I might say negative spiritual phenomena, rather than nuts and bolts spaceship with scientists on board here to see what the carbon levels are in our bodies, or the copper levels in our bodies are.
Let's examine that from another perspective, right? So it's said that they're having poltergeist-like phenomena happen at the same time that they're viewing a ship follow them around, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So let's try to imagine whether our guests or observers are complex AI or they're beings, whatever it is. They're observing this couple, and then they observe something that they've never observed before, and or maybe they've observed before, and it's got their curiosity. Hypothetically speaking, they see these people, but they're also seeing this activity around. They're like, what the hell is this now? That's interesting. These people have other beings around that are not quite physical, and so maybe they study these people to see what it is that's harassing them. Right? Now the study includes this poltergeist activity. I know
that's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, consider this: if I'm on another planet and I was observing a species, and there's a couple of them in particular I'm watching for whatever reason, and I happen to notice something materialize and cause harm, or even if it's it's benign, it's doing nothing, but I see it. Now I'm interested in that couple. Why are they being followed? What are these things around them? I got to study this. Have we seen this before? Yes, we have. Well, where have we seen it? It becomes a new part of their study. I mean, that's what I imagine. I don't know that they're influencing it.
I'm not sure of the cause and effect there. If a couple has never had poltergeist experiences in their home, and then shortly after viewing a UFO, they begin to have poltergeist experiences, that appears to be the pattern,
right? Rather
than the other way around. But you never know. I mean, it would be interesting from an observer's viewpoint. Hey, what are those beings?
Well, consider
ones that we don't even believe in as a cultured society.
Right. So consider what the devil's greatest trick was. What is it? He convinced the world he didn't exist. And so for all we know, these people have had these entities in their life all along. We don't know I mean, it could be a negative influence in their life, period, that was around them. Now you have this object here that's observing them. And then the spirit that's been hanging out with these people are disturbed by this. And that's when they start behaving erratically. They've been discovered. So if you're really going on that whole, the devil's trick is to convince the world it didn't exist, and now something sees you, you're going to behave differently, right? It's going to have some pushback. And so it's going to torment these people, what maybe giving the idea to whatever's observing them, piss off, and it just didn't work out that way. There's a lot to it, especially.
Well, and it just shows that if any of this is true, and if any of those things are true, it just shows that we only see the tip of the iceberg of the world and of the life around us.
I agree. I completely agree with that. I was reading in your summary about, the idea of uploads and downloads from our visitors, right? And
psychic downloads, psychic uploads.
Consider the
and I know for sure that's going on.
Sure. No, I mean, you're not speaking crazy. I worked in radiology some years ago, and when you viewed a human brain under MRI or CT, contrast, you can see it's a complex computer. It has receptors, undoubtedly. Sure. And our government's I used to watch a show which is no longer on, but we would figure out ways to send data to someone's mind directly. And that was a show in the early 2000s, which got canceled. Now it's probably in an experiment somewhere where it's more practical use. We have on the horizon things like Neuralink, where you're gonna have a chip in your brain. You could use basically your phone, in your brain. And so when you consider all these factors, the download makes sense. And abduction in itself, outside of the initial physical abduction in the beginnings, a lot of the people I speak to say it's not as constant as it once was. And it took me a while to put together, well, why is that? And then I figured out we have phones, computers, Ring doors, Alexas in every house, Google's in every house. They can monitor us without us knowing at any point they want.
Sure.
We made it really easy. We made it extremely easy for them, And so other than needing the checkup, we'll call it, every so often something's got to be appropriated physically, then that's when they get involved physically. So
you could be right. Or I have heard people suggest that they may have conducted their experiments and are ready to move on to phase 2.
Right. And, I'd spoken to a lot of people, even as recently as Bill Konkoleski, where his phone would ring and there'd be nothing there, but he would have a knowing or a sensation. And I've heard this from a number of people where their phone would ring and there's this moment of like, they sense something's going on, but nothing's happening. No one's on the phone. And how do we know they're not uploading and downloading that way? We made it easy for them. We always have a phone by our side. We have a supercomputer in our pocket all the time.
Sure. And I'm sure the beings, whatever they are, have figured out how to crack the Apple security that the FBI is still working on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's in part, I think that's why the government doesn't fully disclose, because how do you tell the people of your nation that, hey, there's something here. There's nothing we can do about it. If they decided to attack, we're basically vulnerable.
Well, and it's very interesting. I think you know that the security chief and head of the Israeli version of NASA, you know, he came out with a book, and what's his name? Ashim something. I've got it here on my website and in my book. But he's an award-winning scientist and head of big departments in Israel. He said that all of this is true, and he said that President Donald Trump was very much aware of it and wanted to disclose, but the Galactic Federation said we're not ready, and they forbade disclosure, and it pissed him off, and he was really perplexed what to do, and he was biting his lip there. What do you think about that?
I don't think. Well, yeah, I think Donald Trump's funny business, right? I think he's a guy that like, yeah, well, I'll just tell him what I'll tweet it, you know. But to answer a higher order that's that powerful, maybe he would submit. I mean, you would think he'd have to, because it's not like you don't get sanctioned.
If anybody's going to tell us, I think it would have been President Trump. I mean,
you don't get sanctioned with, let's say, a quote unquote Galactic Federation. You don't get sanctioned. You disappear. You know. Yeah. So. That being said, it's hard to say. I say it because if the government I think they have to speed up disclosure. I'll tell you why. And I said this a lot in the podcast. Private industry is going to space. The billionaire club, they're doing it. And they're not doing it in the name of science. Well, Elon is, but the majority of them are doing it because, well, Elon's doing it. I want to do it. I'm going to put celebrities up there. We're going to make a cruise that people pay top dollar for to go around the moon. Now, imagine that. You go on a dinner cruise around the moon. This is happening now. And eventually, in that state, when you have celebrities with cameras and there's tons of them and they witness something, that's viral. You're not suppressing that. So they're speeding up disclosure a little bit because of that. How much will they disclose? I think even if with billionaires in space, with, let's say, the entire cast of a TV show, they spot a UFO, they will acknowledge the existence of these objects. I don't think they'll speak the purpose and what they are. Until that time has to happen. So I kind of agree. I don't think humanity's ready yet. And, you know, we still kill in the name of weird ideology. We still separate on. Well, I
agree with that, but I don't see how we're going to overcome that anytime in the next several hundred years.
No.
We have, again, as you've said, our industrial revolution was very recent. I mean, I tell my daughters, you know, I look young and beautiful, don't get me wrong. But when I was a little boy, I mean, a very little boy, I met people who were alive when Lincoln was president. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's how fast we've come from horse and buggy. So, we have a long way to go, I think, just to bring some of our fellow humans up out of the jungles and up out of the deserts, you know, with their primitive thinking. So perhaps that's why, you know, we're not ready as a species. But I would certainly think that many groups, societies, even individuals on Earth would be approachable and would fit in very well with that kind of that kind of system, that kind of culture. And I would hope that that many of us are being kind of inducted into a higher vision of what's going on. I don't think Stephen Greer is, you know, and you know the ponytail crowd who's trying to, you know,
summon them.
Yeah, summon them.
I don't get that.
But
either.
I think they're being led down a merry path. I think they're being deceived.
Sounds very cult-like to me.
Yeah, but I do think that there are people who legitimately say that they are part of initiation into something else, and whether President Trump really knew about it or not. But this, again, going back to this Israeli leader, he is at the very top of government and the very top of science there. And he said, hey, I'm just disclosing. I don't care. I've already gotten all my awards. I don't need any more awards. I'm going to tell you what's going on.
Huh.
And so he disclosed in his own way. And the rest of us are just left to scratch our heads wondering, well, is this guy legit? Is he making this up? Why would he come out and say this, ruin his credibility? But as he says, he's got nothing to lose anymore. So he came out and told us, and he said Donald Trump was very much a part of that situation.
Not to mention, he's in a country, here in America, we're pretty lucky. The ramification for talking openly here, just maybe a jail sentence. Certain places, they just kill you.
Oh yeah, Israel.
Yeah.
I wrote the book of a man who grew up in Israel, and then he came here, and he was very successful, and I might say was even associated with Elon Musk very, very directly for a few years. And he told me about the reality of growing up in Israel, and of course, whenever they have a skirmish, he's back there with his Uzi standing on the lines, even though now he's in his 70s. So yeah, they're very disciplined.
Yeah, they're very particular about national security.
Everything. National security is everything to them. So for this doctor, I could look up his name. It's here on the website. I have a website called UFOdisclosure.us, where I put all the latest, greatest information and the president's statements and various government statements, but intelligence leaders here. Yeah, Dr. Haim Ashad is under intelligence leaders.
Huh. And, I'll have to read his book.
He's the one who came out.
There's a couple things here too, James. One, our visitors have had ample time to collect DNA from this planet. As I said earlier, right now we're collecting DNA from everything on planet Earth, just in the likely event of something catastrophic. Are they really motivated to speak to us ever? They have the DNA. They can repopulate here or anywhere for that matter. They don't really need much from us, right? The other side of the coin that comes here soon, if they were to communicate with us, there's this thing, Neuralink and other technology like Neuralink, because it's not the only one. When we link up and we see each other for not the exterior, but what we are internally, things like,
as Paul said, when we see as we are seen and know as we are known.
Right. When we're linked up to something like Neuralink and we're seeing each other and we're communicating with no words, and you can't really, you can't deceive anyone when you're linked that way, right? That's when you start recognizing yourself as a species. You don't see the race, politics, or religion anymore. You just see the individual, the species in itself, right? And perhaps maybe then with a higher
no one left to hate.
Right.
How's that going to be, huh?
Exactly. Like, wait, this is all, we have information ready at our finger. Because, people in Russia have no clue the real reasons that they're their invasion. They don't know. They know what their government tells them. People in North Korea.
Well, we hear that. I know they were fairly open. At least they had the internet for a while. I don't know how much.
Well, it's controlled. Like in North Korea, forget it.
Oh, sure.
They have no idea what's going on in the outside world. They're oblivious. And and in China, they have a social system where you're scored upon, your behavior and your opinions.
Sure.
So, when you hear things like that, it's hard to say that one day we'll come together as a species, because there's still these controlling factors amongst large bodies of people that they're not capable of seeing one another as we are, a species. But however, when you get to a point where you're linked up, however it happens, and you start seeing past that, and you're talking still hundreds of years, because it's not going to be instant. Because at the same, it's good tech, but there's always the bad tech out there. There's people, well, let's hack this guy's brain and blah, blah, blah. We don't know. There's going to be good and bad to that. I don't personally, I don't like the idea of everyone being linked up by a Neuralink, because although it's a great idea for communication and seeing past differences, it's also, there's always the ones out there that want to do the wrong thing and use it for the wrong thing. And imagine using propaganda in someone's mind all the time. It's scary business, right?
Yeah, it is. But as you say, that may be the final step to
could be
to becoming a species, to becoming a united species, one that actually works together rather than works, against one another.
It would come.
But I'm not looking forward to it.
Yeah, nor am I.
I'm a bit of a nationalist myself.
Yeah, I kind of like being able to be separated a little bit, right? So,
well, especially when we have people who are still living, millennia in the past in their thinking and more or less in their lifestyle, and they're very hostile and violent. We really don't need that walking among our society trying to convert us to that lifestyle and that belief system. It's kind of, that iron curtain sometimes, protects us as much as it shelters, people from truth.
Yeah, I agree. I say I agree for a reason, because, free radical anything's dangerous too, because you get these people where it's not even just pushback. They want to push their own agenda. Humans do that all the time. You know what? I do it. I did it as a kid. Still do it now. We have our circles of people. I'm like, oh, well, this, I wear Nike and this is a product I use when I shoot pool. And,
sure.
And in some case you are somewhat influencing the guy to your left. I'm like, well, maybe I should wear Nike. Maybe I should shoot pool with that stick. You know what I mean?
But that really is the genius of the American system of, our founders gave us a system of live and let live.
Right.
To the extent possible, live and let live. And that really, that sums up our entire system of government as it was planned by our founders. Now, I'm not saying that's how it is now. Fascism is spreading its tentacles very quickly these days.
Yeah.
Where, others want to control, what others do, but live and let live. To the extent that we have followed that commercially, socially, religiously, we have prospered. And that's why, this little, colony of the British Empire has done so well, because of that philosophy underlying our culture and civilization. But to the extent we get away from it, I would like to see that spread. And I guess that's spreading democracy, right?
Right.
And for some reason, that's become a taboo. But I would like to see live and let live spread a lot farther. And I think that would get us closer to, if there is a galactic federation, I think it would get us much closer to the Galactic Federation than any of these other things that are going on right now.
I would agree. I mean, consider.
Including a Neuralink.
Yeah. I mean, consider again, I say this to a lot of people, let's say they crossed the vastness of space to get here. Let's say they created wormholes to get here. Either way, they didn't come here with resources to, push their agenda. And so that being said, I don't think that they're individualized. In other words, let's say Bob the alien and John the alien hang out together. They're not concerned for who's wearing what fashion or what they think they're not. I don't imagine that they have social media influencers, right? Because to do this to conduct this experiment, which leads me more to believe that it's my personal belief anyway, that it may be an AI system, is because you had to do it with the collective consciousness of everyone. It's a huge endeavor. It's a major journey to embark upon, and you cannot.
Well, many experiencers report that is what they're hearing. That is the message that they are. They have that hive mentality. But again, I always go back against what I consider the benchmark of a real experience, and that's the Udo Wharton experience, where even though they were dressed similarly, they did seem to have individualism. They did seem to have respect for our privacy and for our rights and for our well-being. And they asked permission. They made offers, and they were more like we would expect a benevolent person to be. But a lot of these creatures who present themselves as aliens here for various purposes, usually some kind of study or experimentation,
right?
They don't appear to have any of those niceties of polite society that we would expect from an intelligent creature,
right? Because it's all business. Now let's go to humans. We're going to Mars. Elon Musk's goal is to go colonize Mars. To begin that program on the application, what you're not going to see on the application are boxes for your race, religion, or your political ideology. None of that will exist. All he cares about are your credentials to go there, to terraform that planet, and to behave on, to think on one wavelength. A lot of
sure. I'm sure there'll be psychological studies, though.
Sure. Oh, there has to be. I mean, and then flip side. Now imagine taking mankind randomly too, not pre-selected. Randomly take 400 people onto a spaceship to go explore the vastness of space. That's not going to work out too well in the long run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've seen some movies that depict that exact scenario.
Yeah, it would become dangerous because there was no pre-selection. You might have got some of the people slip on there. They have an agenda, whether it be for themselves or for a greater body of people, like a political background or a religion. It's just
that darn Dr. Smith always messing with a robot.
Yeah. So it's going to have a fallout, right? So to go to Mars and terraform, you have to have a single-minded, forward-thinking group of people because you're going there with purpose, right? It's a study. It's a huge embarkment. So you're definitely not taking, pop stars. You're certainly not taking actors. There's no shot you're bringing political figures, because by the time you get there, they're all slapping their, like, this part of Mars is Mars, or this part of Mars is ours, and we're going to build this here. Like, that's not. It'll get out of control rapidly. And things like currency won't even matter over there, right? Because what's the value of $1 on Mars? It's worthless. You need to start mining your own material to survive there. It will be interesting to see what happens when we get to that point.
Well, and again, you're more or less describing the American frontier 200 years ago.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's the only problem with that is we eventually, because even here in America, we're very guilty. America didn't come, we didn't get here and be like, oh, we found this place, it's ours, and we're going to live harmonious in harmony. A lot of killing happened here for a lot of reasons. I mean, consider the indigenous people here. They had pushback. You're coming to our world, and you're taking our, we see the results of that. But consider the civil wars, and this wasn't a peaceful gathering that just ended up perfect in the end. A lot of bloodshed to get to this point, and that's really because people think differently. The South thinks this way, the North thinks that way, and this is the way it should be. And we're pushing our agenda on you. And if you don't side with us, you're our enemy. And it's great to go to Mars. We can't have that. We have to go to Mars with a very singular idea of what's going to be done there. And it's the terraform, and it's in the name of science. Now, later on, will ideologies appear? Because of the nature of humans, it's gonna. It's unavoidable.
Science fiction writers for decades have tackled those kinds of problems, and again, there's always more drama when you have something that goes awry. Then nobody wants to read a book where it's all peaceful and happy right to the end. 600 pages of that. But to the extent that we can do that, live peacefully in a mission with a vision that everybody's on board with the same vision, and they don't throw a wrench in the engine. That's certainly ideal and what we're looking forward to. But you see the politics of Earth, and just the space shuttle. That there was the space shuttle, second space shuttle that blew up when the tiles were inadequate. And I've done a small study on that. And, that goes back to some politics. Why were those particular shields being used and others were not? If you start getting ideologues involved in any equation, you're going to start getting bad math. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. Or budget and cutting corners, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, and whenever you have like our bridge system, whenever you have the lowest bidder get the job, even going into space for a 200-year mission, you're liable to have a few setbacks.
That's what I like about Elon. This guy checks, double checks, triple checks, quadruple checks things. Right? That guy's very particular. If I had to guess anyone to be an alien, I would think it'd be him. I mean, he owns nothing. He's a billionaire. Keep in mind, he's a billionaire with no property, no personal items. He rents. Have you ever heard of that before?
Well, yes. I used to teach seminars on how to control everything and own nothing. That was for asset protection and tax reduction.
So he's smarter than we guessed.
Yep, he's a smart cookie.
That's incredible.
You control everything but own nothing. That's ideal, especially in a confiscatory government like most are.
Yeah, because some other billionaires, you go to their house, it's like going to Disney World. It's crazy.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm a ghostwriter, and so I end up in the homes of some of the most influential people in America. I can't say the world, but in America, and I end up spending some time with them as I interview them for their books. And I have to say, they are truly interesting on the outside and the inside. But I'll tell you, without when you really want to know what a person is like, talk to their children.
Yeah.
Just get the children aside just a little bit and see if they're polite, see what they really think of their parents and things. And I have been astounded at how often the children of celebrities and powerful people are very polite to me, very polite to the help in the house, the people, cooking, cleaning, cutting the shrubs outside. Almost without exception, I have been pleasantly surprised to see how that goes. So, but yeah, they billionaires, they do tend to live at a different level than most people, and they think differently than most people. But for the most part, the grand secret, they're just hard workers.
Yeah, no, they
don't watch cable TV all day and all night.
Listen,
they're working.
I don't doubt when you look at like Bigelow, Elon, even Bill Gates, these people, Jeff Bezos, these people never stop thinking, ever. There's always there's always a blueprint in front of them, always.
And they're more or less just like everybody. It's just that they're willing to go to the next level on it.
Right. They don't believe in 5 minutes. Right. It doesn't work for Elon Musk for like the amount of companies he has. And now there's the Tesla house, the Tesla cars, his internet, Neuralink's coming. My head would explode. There's no way. That's just too much. I mean, my hat's off to him. So you're right. They work hard. They play hard. So I agree with that wholeheartedly. Anyway, James, it's been a long, before we close out, by the way, let's talk about, tell her about your website, your books, where they can find them. And I'll put it in the description for them as well.
Well, I appreciate that. Again, I'm a ghostwriter, so if anybody needs a ghostwriter, my main website is ghostwriterus.com. And I have a kind of a personal professional website that's just jamesthompson.pro. And then if anybody wants to find out the latest on UFO disclosure, it's ufodisclosure.us. And then let's see, I have another website that, that's good enough. And then my book is Worlds Without Number. I've sent you the links. You can buy that on Amazon, Worlds Without Number by James Thompson, or you can buy it at cedarfort.com. That's my publisher with that book. So those are the things I'm hawking today, I guess. If anybody wants more information or wants to get a book, that's how you get a hold of me. And I'm always interested if you have experiences with the unknown. I always invite people this website to ufodisclosure.us. There's a discussion section where I invite people to share their experiences, and we've just kind of got that up and running lately. Or be sure to share your experiences there so we can learn from you.
I'm under the impression I'm going to have James on a lot, everyone.
Well, it's been my pleasure. So I'd love to come back and talk with you. You're very intelligent, and I like your questions, and you challenge some of my assumptions, and I appreciate that.
I appreciate it too. So if those of you listening, we're going to say good night, good day, good evening, whatever it is for you, and I'm going to talk to James in post.
Thanks, Adam.